Around 100,000 years ago, your entire species may number only in the tens of thousands, scattered across enormous stretches of Africa and parts of Eurasia, living without farms, permanent houses, metal tools, written instructions, or anything resembling a grocery store that stays inconveniently open until midnight. You wake beneath a sky with no aircraft trails and no distant highway hum. The ground beneath you is hard, dusty, and cool. Somewhere beyond the camp, an animal calls from the darkness. You cannot check the weather. You cannot call for help. There is no emergency room, no police station, no cupboard full of canned food. Every object around you must either be found, carried, shaped, remembered, or made. And yet people survive. Not for a week, not for a season. Generation after generation manages to stay alive in landscapes filled with drought, cold snaps, predators, injuries, hunger, and sudden environmental change. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you are listening from, along with your local time. Now, dim the lights and allow the modern room around you to become very quiet. Your mind drifts toward a landscape that feels familiar and completely alien at the same time. You are standing somewhere in Eastern Africa during the late Pleistocene. The exact place hardly matters at first, because the lesson arrives quickly wherever you happen to be. Survival is not one dramatic contest between humans and nature. It is 1,000 small decisions made correctly often enough. The sun climbs. Warmth spreads across your shoulders. Dry grass brushes your legs. And the air carries the scent of dust, crushed leaves, animal dung, and distant water. None of these smells are merely background decoration. They are information. Fresh dung can tell you that large animals have passed nearby. Damp soil can suggest water close to the surface. The sharp scent of smoke may mean another group is somewhere beyond a ridge. Even silence can matter. When birds suddenly stop calling, you pay attention. Modern life encourages you to ignore most of your surroundings. A wall keeps weather away. A refrigerator hides the problem of food storage. Shoes politely negotiate with sharp stones on your behalf. Here, the landscape refuses to be ignored. It is constantly speaking. You learn to listen because mistakes are expensive. One of the first dangers is temperature. People sometimes imagine prehistoric Africa as endlessly hot, but climates fluctuate dramatically during the Pleistocene. Glacial cycles affect rainfall, vegetation, coastlines, deserts, and the movement of animals. Even tropical environments can include chilly nights, high elevations, and seasons when familiar water sources shrink or disappear. Records confirm that anatomically modern humans are already living in Africa by this period, while other human populations, including Neanderthals, occupy parts of Eurasia. But being human does not grant you control over the world, not even slightly. You're a medium-sized primate with rather unimpressive natural weapons. Your fingernails are useless against a lion. Your teeth are not especially frightening. You do not possess the speed of an antelope, the strength of a large ape, the hide of a rhinoceros, or the sensible protective shell of a tortoise. Evolution has apparently handed you soft skin, slow children, and an unusually large brain, then wished you the very best of luck. Still, that brain changes the calculation. You notice patterns. You remember where fruit appeared during a particular season. You recognize hoof prints. You understand which valleys flood after heavy rain. You know where snakes hide when the ground becomes hot. You learn which plants irritate the skin and which can be eaten safely. Knowledge turns an unpredictable landscape into something slightly less unpredictable. That distinction can keep you alive. At midday, heat becomes a problem of its own. Your body handles long-distance movement unusually well compared with many other mammals. Sweating helps you release heat, although sweating also means losing water, and losing water means another problem is already waiting politely behind the first one. So you plan movement carefully. You rest in shade when necessary. You avoid wasting energy. Energy is precious because every calorie must come from the environment. Walking several unnecessary miles is not merely annoying, it can alter the balance between gaining food and spending more energy than you receive. This is one reason ancient survival is often less heroic than popular imagination suggests. You are not charging dramatically across the plains every morning with a spear raised above your head. Much of survival consists of noticing, waiting, choosing, carrying, remembering, and deciding that perhaps irritating the enormous animal with horns is not essential today. Predators remain an obvious danger. Lions, leopards, hyenas, crocodiles, and other carnivores share parts of the landscape with human communities. Some predators avoid groups of people, while others may investigate the vulnerable, especially children or isolated individuals. Darkness changes the atmosphere completely. Your eyes are not designed for perfect night vision. Once daylight disappears, the world belongs increasingly to creatures that hear better, smell better, or see better than you do. Even during daylight, tall vegetation can hide movement. You learn not to wander alone without reason. Children remain close to adults. Group members watch different directions. Human survival is already becoming social survival. There is another danger, quieter than predators and often more persistent. Injury. A twisted ankle can matter enormously when your life requires walking. A cut can become infected. A damaged tooth can make eating difficult. A badly burned hand can reduce your ability to make tools or gather food. There is no concept of a minor inconvenience when your body is your primary survival equipment, and yet archaeological evidence occasionally shows individuals who survive serious injuries or physical limitations for considerable periods. Such survival suggests that other people may have helped them. That matters. A community that shares food with someone who cannot gather effectively for a few days gains something difficult to measure but extraordinarily valuable. Tomorrow, roles may reverse. Today, you help. Later, someone helps you. No formal contract is required. The arrangement is written in memory, relationship, obligation, affection, and perhaps the simple recognition that a group loses knowledge when it loses people. An older adult may remember a water source younger members have never visited. A skilled toolmaker may know exactly how a particular stone fractures. A grandmother may recognize a plant that resembles an edible species but causes severe illness. A successful tracker may remember how wounded animals behave. A child watches all of this. Education does not take place inside a classroom. It happens constantly. You learn by observing hands. You listen to warnings. You imitate movements. You make mistakes while adults are nearby enough to prevent those mistakes from becoming final. Oddly enough, one curious feature of ancient human survival is how much of it may depend on information that leaves almost no archaeological trace at all. A wooden digging stick can rot. A woven container can disappear. A spoken warning vanishes the moment the voice becomes silent. A gesture showing which direction water lies leaves nothing for an archaeologist to excavate. This creates a strange problem when you try to understand the deep past. Stone survives beautifully. Knowledge does not. So the archaeological record can make early life appear more obsessed with rocks than it really is. You can almost imagine future archaeologists discovering thousands of smartphone cases, but no smartphones, and concluding that modern humans worshipped rectangular plastic frames. The missing materials matter: wood, bark, fibers, skins, sinew, grasses, and other organic materials are likely important to daily life even when they rarely survive for 100,000 years. Scholars bicker over how complex certain technologies, communication systems, and symbolic behaviors are at this time because the surviving evidence is incomplete and uneven. That uncertainty should not make the people around you seem primitive. Quite the opposite. To survive without written instructions, Accumulated knowledge must live inside human beings. Memory becomes storage. Conversation becomes a library. Demonstration becomes a manual. Tradition becomes insurance. The landscape itself is another kind of archive. You know certain trees because your parents pointed them out. You recognize distant hills because someone once described what lies beyond them. Routes between reliable water sources are preserved in stories and repeated journeys. A group that forgets can suffer. A group that remembers gains options. Weather adds further uncertainty. Rain can transform dry ground into temporary abundance. Grass rises. Herds return. Plants flower. Pools fill. Then months pass. The water retreats. The same location that once seemed generous becomes hostile. You cannot simply remain because you like the view. Mobility is one of your great defenses. When conditions change, people can move. That sounds straightforward until you imagine what movement actually means. You must carry children. You may transport useful stone, hides, food, embers, wooden tools, and personal objects. You must know where you're going. You must judge whether water exists along the route. You must avoid entering dangerous terrain blindly, and you must decide when leaving is safer than staying. Too early, and you abandon resources unnecessarily. Too late, and everyone begins the journey already thirsty and weak. No calendar hangs on a wall. Seasonal timing is read through plants, animal behavior, stars, rainfall, temperature, and accumulated memory. You notice migration. You notice fruiting. You notice when insects become abundant. You notice when the air changes. Survival belongs to attention. Even children become observers. A small child walking beside you may already know that some berries are forbidden, that certain insects sting, that water near a particular bank is dangerous, and that wandering toward thick brush alone produces immediate adult disapproval. Childhood is still childhood. Of course, there is play, there is curiosity, there is probably laughter, teasing, imitation, competition, boredom, and the prehistoric equivalent of asking whether you are there yet. Humans remain humans. The serious business of staying alive does not erase personality. As evening approaches, the temperature begins to fall. The light becomes softer. Long shadows stretch across the ground. You look toward the horizon with more caution than you did at midday. This is when familiarity matters most. The safest camp is rarely chosen randomly. People consider visibility, access to resources, wind, nearby animals, terrain, and the possibility of sudden danger. You settle close enough to others that voices remain nearby. Someone checks the surroundings. Someone watches child. Someone handles food. Someone examines a tool. The group becomes a small island of awareness inside a much larger landscape. And gradually, one truth becomes clear. Ancient humans do not survive because they are stronger than everything around them. They survive because they are flexible. They can learn. They can cooperate. They can remember. They can change plans when familiar conditions disappear. They can communicate danger. They can pass knowledge from one generation to another. A single person is vulnerable. A connected group carrying years of shared experience is something else entirely. Night gathers quietly across the land now. The heat leaves the ground. The scents of grass and dust soften in the cooler air. Beyond your little cluster of people, shapes become uncertain. The world remains dangerous. But danger is no longer simply chaos. There are patterns inside it. There are signs you recognize. There are people beside you who recognize them too. You hear low voices nearby, steady and familiar, and for this moment there is enough food, enough water, enough knowledge, and enough company. Nothing about tomorrow is guaranteed. It never is. But tonight, you're still here, and in the deep human past, That simple fact is victory enough. Darkness changes everything. The temperature falls, the edges of the landscape disappear, and sounds that seemed ordinary in daylight become more difficult to place. A rustle in the grass might be nothing. A distant bark might belong to an animal passing harmlessly through the night, or it might be worth listening to very carefully. You crouch near a low glow of fire and feel heat on one side of your face, while cool air presses against the other. Smoke curls upward, wood cracks softly. A faint smell of ash settles into hair and skin. Around you, bodies gather close enough to share warmth without crowding the flames. The arrangement looks simple, but almost nothing about it is accidental. Fire is one of the greatest advantages humans possess, and by 100,000 years ago, people in many regions already know how to use it. The exact history of controlled fire is complicated. Evidence reaches much farther into the past, but scholars still argue whether some early traces represent deliberate human control, natural burning, or repeated use of places where wildfires had already occurred. By your time, however, fire is no curiosity, it is part of life, and life changes around it. The first benefit is obvious: warmth. Even in regions usually described as warm, nights can become surprisingly cold, especially in open country, high ground, dry seasons, and areas far from the equator. Human bodies lose heat steadily when temperatures drop, and wind makes the problem worse. So you do not simply sit wherever seems pleasant. You think about shelter. A shallow cave can block wind. A rock overhang can keep rain away. A cluster of trees can reduce exposure. A slope may protect you from the strongest gusts. Sometimes the landscape provides a ready-made refuge. Sometimes you improve it. Branches can be leaned together. Grass can be piled into bedding. Brush can form a screen. Animal hides, where available, can provide extra insulation. None of these structures need to resemble houses in the modern sense. A shelter does not require walls, windows, a front door, and someone complaining about the roof. It only needs to make the night less dangerous. Your fingers brush against rough wood as you adjust a branch beside the sleeping area. The bark catches against your palm. The structure is modest, but it changes the movement of air enough to matter. That is the important thing. Ancient survival often depends on small improvements. A few degrees warmer, a little less wind, a slightly drier sleeping place, one extra hour of good rest. Each advantage seems minor until several are combined. Then they become the difference between waking stronger and waking exhausted. Sleep itself is a survival problem. You cannot remain fully alert every hour of every day. Your body demands rest, but sleep makes you vulnerable. You cannot watch for predators while deeply asleep. You cannot immediately notice a child wandering away. You cannot react quickly to changing weather. Group living helps solve this problem. People do not necessarily sleep in perfect silence or complete stillness. Infants stir, adults wake, someone adjusts the fire, someone hears an animal and lifts their head. Night becomes a shared responsibility. There may not be a formally appointed guard sitting upright with crossed arms until sunrise. The pattern can be more natural than that. Different people wake at different times. Older adults may sleep more lightly. Parents respond to children. A person near the edge of the group notices movement. The result is a community that is rarely completely unaware. Fire adds another layer of protection. Many large predators dislike approaching active flames, especially when humans are gathered around them. That does not make fire a magical force field. A hungry or curious predator may still come close. Wind can weaken flames. Rain can extinguish them. Fuel can run out. But a bright, smoky, noisy camp is very different from a cluster of sleeping primates lying in darkness. The fire announces presence. It changes smell. It changes visibility. It changes the confidence of everyone sitting nearby. Records confirm that hearths and burned materials appear at a number of prehistoric sites. showing that controlled fire becomes deeply woven into human behavior long before permanent settlements exist. The fire also allows time to expand. Without artificial light, sunset sharply limits activity. With fire, darkness becomes usable. You can repair tools. You can prepare food. You can inspect injuries. You can tend children. You can talk. You can teach. You can simply remain awake together. This may sound ordinary, but ordinary things are often the most important. Imagine the difference between a group that must become inactive every evening and one that can continue communicating for hours. Night provides a strange social space. The landscape beyond the fire is hidden. Tension turns inward. Faces become visible against darkness. Voices carry differently. Stories, warnings, memories, jokes, and plans can be exchanged without the distractions of daytime movement. Historians cannot reconstruct exactly what people say around fires 100,000 years ago, and no agreement has been reached on how sophisticated spoken language is in every human population at this date. But communication of some kind is essential. You need ways to share information. Where was water found? Which direction did animals move? Who saw smoke in the distance? Which child is ill? Which route should the group take? A firelit night is a useful time for such knowledge to circulate. Cooking may be even more transformative. Heat changes food. Meat becomes softer. Some plant foods become easier to chew. Certain toxins can be reduced or destroyed. Calories may become easier for the body to obtain from cooked food. Cooking also changes how long eating takes, and how hard the digestive system must work. You do not need to understand chemistry. You notice results. Roots that are unpleasant raw become better after heating. Meat becomes easier for children or older adults to eat. Hard foods soften. Fat melts. The smell alone carries across the camp and makes hungry people suddenly very attentive. Of course, cooking creates new problems. Food attracts animals. Smoke can reveal your location. Flames can spread. Children can burn themselves. A careless movement can turn a useful fire into something alarming very quickly. So fire requires knowledge. Which wood burns slowly. Which fuel produces too much smoke. Which branches spit sparks. How do you keep embers alive through the night? How close can bedding safely be placed? These details are learned through experience. A person who understands fire is not merely someone who knows how to make flames. They understand fuel, wind, timing, heat, and restraint. Making fire from scratch may be difficult. This is why embers can be extremely valuable. Instead of creating a new flame every time, people may preserve glowing coals and carry them carefully when moving between camps. A small ember can contain an entire evening's comfort. Oddly enough, some traditional methods of transporting fire involve wrapping hot material in slow-burning plant matter, bark, fungus, or other substances that allow an ember to smoulder without bursting into open flame. It is a curious footnote because it turns fire into something almost portable. Not fire as a dramatic blaze, fire as patience, a tiny orange point protected from wind, a resource that must remain alive. You can imagine the annoyance if it goes out. There's no drawer containing a box of matches. No one produces a lighter from a pocket. A dead ember may mean beginning again with friction, sparks, suitable tinder, dry fuel, and considerable patience. Suddenly, carrying a fragile coal seems like excellent planning. Shelter demands similar attention. Caves seem ideal from a modern perspective. They are solid. They resist rain. They provide shade. They look reassuringly permanent. But caves come with complications. Other animals may want them. Smoke can accumulate inside. Water may flow through during storms. Loose stone can fall. Deep chambers become completely dark. Some caves are damp and cold. The entrance may funnel wind rather than stop it. So people learn that a cave is not automatically safe simply because it has a ceiling. Location within the shelter matters. A fire too deep inside can fill the space with smoke. A sleeping area too close to the entrance can remain cold. A bedding place under unstable rock is a poor long-term choice. You inspect surfaces. You notice soot. You look for animal bones, droppings, claw marks, nests, damp patches, and signs of previous occupation. Some evidence from prehistoric caves suggests that humans and carnivores occasionally use the same locations at different times. This is not a charming shared tenancy agreement. If hyenas regularly occupy a cave, you may prefer another address. Open-air camps can be safer in other ways. You can see approaching animals. Smoke disperses more easily. There is room to move. But exposure becomes the problem. Rain can soak bedding. Wind strips away body heat. Morning dew dampens surfaces. In treeless country, fuel may be scarce. Every campsite is a negotiation between competing risks. There is rarely a perfect answer. A good camp today can become a bad camp tomorrow if weather changes. Wind shifts. Rain begins. Animals move closer. Wood runs low. The group must remain flexible. Bedding is another quiet technology. You do not need a mattress to understand that lying directly on cold ground is unpleasant and inefficient. Grass, leaves, reeds, hides, or branches can create insulation. They raise the body away from damp soil. They soften hard surfaces. They may reduce contact with insects. Some prehistoric sites preserve hints of plant bedding, though such materials rarely survive. A council decree obviously does not exist to tell anyone how thick a sleeping mat should be. But surviving traces of ancient plant layers prove that people sometimes deliberately prepare living surfaces rather than simply collapsing wherever fatigue catches them. That changes how you pitch the night. People organize space. Food may be kept away from sleeping areas. Children remain near familiar adults. Tools sit within reach. Fire occupies a controlled position. Waste is pushed outward. Bedding is arranged where the ground is suitable. A camp becomes a temporary architecture of habits. No bricks are necessary. Social order creates structure. Cold weather makes those habits more urgent. During colder climatic phases, people living in Eurasia face conditions far harsher than those in many tropical regions. Neanderthals in particular occupy landscapes where winter temperatures can be severe. Their bodies show adaptations associated with cold environments, including compact builds that help conserve heat. But anatomy alone is not enough. Behavior matters, fire matters, shelter matters, clothing or hide coverings likely matter, choosing when to travel matters. A person exposed to cold wind for hours loses energy quickly. A group that can reduce exposure saves calories. Those calories do not need to be replaced. Efficiency becomes survival. You begin to see why night is not empty time. It is an engineering problem, a social problem, a temperature problem, a predator problem, a fuel problem, and somehow humans repeatedly solve enough of these problems to wake again. The fire settles lower. A piece of wood collapses inward with a soft shower of sparks. Someone nudges another branch toward the coals. A child shifts against a sleeping adult. Outside the warm circle, the air is cold and enormous. Inside it, heat gathers close to the ground. The shelter blocks the worst of the breeze. Bedding keeps dampness away from skin. Smoke drifts into darkness. The arrangement is temporary, fragile, and remarkably effective. You do not conquer the night. You make it manageable. That is For several quiet hours, the dangerous world becomes smaller. The glow holds. The group rests. And darkness, which once belonged almost entirely to sharper eyes and stronger jaws, now contains a little island of human light. Morning hunger arrives without ceremony. There is no stocked pantry waiting nearby, no grain field ripening on schedule, And certainly no cheerful breakfast buffet promising unlimited eggs until 10:30. Your first meal depends on what the landscape offers, what the season allows, and what your group already knows about finding it. So you begin by looking down. That may seem disappointing if your imagination prefers dramatic hunters chasing enormous animals across the horizon, but much of prehistoric survival probably depends on foods that do not roar, stampede, or attempt to bite you. Roots hide beneath the soil, seeds cling to grasses, fruit appears on trees and shrubs, nuts fall in certain seasons, shellfish cluster along shorelines, bird eggs wait in nests, insects provide small packages of protein and fat, honey, when found, offers a dense burst of energy, provided you're willing to negotiate with thousands of extremely irritated bees. This is food gathering, and it requires far more skill than simply wandering around until something edible appears. You need memory, you need timing, you need botanical knowledge, you need to recognize not only what can be eaten, but also which part of a plant is useful and when. A root may be nutritious during one season and bitter during another. A fruit may be safe when ripe and unpleasant when green. Seeds may require grinding, pounding, soaking, roasting, or some combination of patient effort. Leaves that look nearly identical can have very different effects on the stomach. There are no printed labels. The difference between food and poison lives inside collective knowledge. You move through open woodland, watching carefully. The ground is warm beneath your feet. Dry stems scrape against your calves. Somewhere nearby, insects buzz among flowering plants, and the air smells faintly of crushed herbs as people walk. A member of the group kneels beside a patch of vegetation. They do not dig randomly. They recognize leaves above the soil and know what lies below. A wooden stick enters the ground. The earth is loosened. A swollen underground tuber appears. The action looks simple, because the knowledge behind it is invisible. That knowledge may have taken generations to build. Records confirm that early humans eat flexible, varied diets rather than relying on one universal prehistoric menu. What people consume depends heavily on habitat, season, climate, available animals, and local plant life. This makes ancient eating habits wonderfully inconvenient for anyone hoping for a single neat answer. There is no one Paleolithic diet. There are thousands. A person near a coast encounters different opportunities from someone living beside a lake, in woodland, on grassland, or in a dry interior region, along shorelines. The tide itself becomes a kind of moving food schedule. When water retreats, rocky pools and exposed flats reveal shellfish, crabs, stranded fish, seaweed, and other resources. You walk across wet stone and feel cool spray on your skin. Shells cling tightly to rock. Collecting them requires patience rather than speed. That is useful. A mussel is considerably less difficult to catch than an antelope. Shellfish also provide relatively predictable food. They cannot migrate several hundred kilometers while you are sleeping. Archaeological sites in parts of Africa preserve shells and other coastal remains, showing that humans exploit marine foods tens of thousands of years before farming. The coast can be generous, but it is not effortless. Tides matter. Sharp rocks cut feet. Waves can knock people over. Some shellfish become dangerous under certain environmental conditions. You still need experience. But once a group learns the rhythms of a shoreline, the sea becomes a recurring pantry that refills itself with impressive reliability. Freshwater environments offer their own possibilities. Fish can be trapped in shallow water. Turtles may be collected. Reeds hide edible roots. Birds gather near lakes. Animals come to drink. Water attracts life, which means people watching a wetland are not only looking for something to drink, they are looking at an entire network of potential calories. Calories are the quiet obsession behind every choice. Your body spends energy constantly. Walking costs energy. Digging costs energy. Carrying costs energy. Pregnancy costs a great deal of energy. Nursing an infant costs more. Growing children require reliable nutrition. Ill people need food even when they cannot gather it. A successful food strategy therefore involves more than finding the richest possible item. It involves finding foods worth the effort required to obtain them. A tiny seed may contain nutrients, but if you spend hours gathering enough seeds to create one mouthful, the bargain becomes questionable. A large tuber hidden in soft soil may be a better return. A tree heavy with fruit can suddenly become an extremely valuable destination. You learn to think in landscapes of opportunity. Certain places matter at certain times. Perhaps one valley produces fruit during a brief season. Perhaps a particular patch of ground contains edible roots after rain. Perhaps nuts ripen near rocky slopes. Perhaps insects emerge in huge numbers for only a few days. Food does not remain evenly distributed. It appears in pulses. You must be there when it appears. This means memory includes time as well as place. People remember not just where food grows, but when. The flowering of one plant may signal that another will soon produce fruit. The arrival of migrating birds may suggest seasonal change. Animal behavior can indicate where water remains. Knowledge connects dozens of observations into a practical calendar without anyone needing to invent Monday. Children absorb this system gradually. You see them collecting small items near adults, watching what is selected and what is ignored. They learn textures and colours. They learn where to search. They learn which tasks require strength and which reward patience. Some foods are ideal for teaching because mistakes are easily corrected. Others are treated with much greater caution. A child reaching toward an unsafe plant probably receives a memorable reaction from nearby adults. There are also foods that modern diners might consider adventurous. Termites can be eaten, grubs can be eaten, caterpillars can be eaten. Certain insects provide impressive amounts of fat and protein for their size. Oddly enough, insects can sometimes be easier to harvest in abundance than larger animals, especially when seasonal swarms or nests concentrate thousands of individuals in one place. To your hungry body, dignity is less important than calories. The prehistoric food critic who refuses a nutritious grub because the presentation is disappointing probably does not receive many invitations to complain twice. Honey occupies a more glamorous place. Wild honey is extraordinarily energy-dense. Finding a hive can therefore be worth considerable effort, but obtaining it may involve climbing, smoke, stings, and coordination. A person who knows bee behavior possesses another specialized skill. One curious footnote from human societies in later periods is the remarkable cooperation sometimes seen between honey hunters and honey-guide birds in parts of Africa, where birds can lead people toward bees' nests and benefit when humans break them open. Whether relationships of this kind extend extremely deep into prehistory cannot be demonstrated with confidence. But the possibility reminds you how closely human food gathering can depend on reading the behavior of other species. Plants often require processing. This is easy to underestimate. Finding food and eating food are not always the same activity. Hard nuts must be cracked. Fibrous roots may need roasting. Seeds may be pounded. Some plants contain compounds that become less harmful after soaking or heating. Others demand careful preparation before they are useful. A stone used for pounding does not look particularly exciting in a museum display. In daily life, it may save teeth and unlock calories. Teeth matter enormously. You have no dentist. Grinding hard food year after year wears enamel. Sand and grit can enter meals during processing. Tiny stone particles from grinding surfaces may end up in food. A damaged tooth can become painful and reduce what you can comfortably eat. Food preparation therefore changes not just taste, but physical accessibility. Children, older adults, and people with dental problems benefit when tough foods are softened or broken into manageable pieces. Sharing becomes central. Imagine a tree producing more fruit than one person can eat before it spoils. The sensible strategy is not necessarily to stand beneath it, defending every piece. Food can move through social relationships. Someone who finds a rich patch may return with others. Someone carrying an infant may gather less efficiently and still receive food. Someone who spends hours making tools may rely partly on other people's collecting. The group does not need perfect equality for sharing to matter. Even partial redistribution reduces individual risk. If your luck is bad today, another person's luck may be good. Tomorrow the pattern reverses. This is especially important because wild food supplies are unpredictable. A familiar plant may fail after drought. Animals may shift routes. Storms may damage fruit. A flood can erase a productive patch. No agreement has been reached on exactly when particular forms of organized food sharing, division of labor, and cooperative provisioning become central to human societies. Because social behavior leaves only indirect archaeological traces. Still, the logic is powerful. Groups can smooth out uncertainty better than isolated individuals. Food storage is another challenge. Without pottery, refrigeration, metal containers, or sealed cupboards, keeping food safe requires ingenuity. Some foods naturally last longer. Nuts and dried seeds are more durable than soft fruit. Meat can sometimes be dried or smoked. Fat may be preserved under suitable conditions. Cool shaded places slow spoilage. Containers can be made from hides, bark, wood, gourds, shells, or woven fibers, though most of these materials decay and vanish from the archaeological record. This missing evidence can distort your picture of daily life. A beautifully woven basket may be more useful during a morning of gathering than a stone hand axe, but one survives for 100,000 years and the other usually disappears. So you imagine hands carrying food in ways that archaeology rarely captures. Bundles of leaves, hide bags, wooden vessels, baskets, perhaps nets or simple fiber bags. Transport matters because food rarely appears exactly where you wish to sleep. You gather away from camp and bring resources back. The more effectively you carry, the more efficiently you can feed others. Now the landscape begins to look different. A patch of trees is not simply scenery. It is future fruit. A muddy bank is not merely dirt. It may hide tubers. A line of birds moving toward water is a clue. A buzzing tree can mean honey. A low tide exposes dinner. A fallen log may contain insects. Survival becomes an act of interpretation. And slowly, the heroic image of prehistoric food changes. You do not need a spectacular kill every day. You need enough. Enough roots, enough fruit, enough shellfish, enough seeds, enough insects, enough shared knowledge to recognize opportunity before hunger becomes dangerous. The work is repetitive sometimes. Certainly. Your back aches from bending. Your fingers become dirty. Your feet grow tired. There are afternoons when the landscape seems miserly, but there are also moments of abundance. A tree crowded with ripe fruit, a shoreline glittering with shells, a patch of edible roots spreading farther than expected. Hands fill. Containers become heavy. Children eat while adults continue gathering. The scent of crushed fruit lingers in the warm air. Nothing about the meal resembles a banquet, yet it represents something more important than luxury. It represents reliability. You survive not because every day produces abundance, but because you know dozens of different ways to avoid emptiness. The land offers no menu. You learn to read it anyway. The tracks begin as shallow marks in damp soil. At first they look like nothing more than dents beside a patch of flattened grass. Then your eyes adjust. One print points forward, another overlaps it, and suddenly the ground becomes a story. An animal passed here, not long ago. You crouch and place your fingers beside the impression. The edges are still sharp. A broken stem nearby has not yet dried. A small dropping lies dark against the earth. The animal may be large enough to feed many people, It may also be large enough to injure you very efficiently. This is where prehistoric hunting loses some of its romantic shine. You're not entering a heroic contest with nature. You are calculating risk. Every hunt begins with a question: is this animal worth the danger? A successful hunter does not merely know how to attack. A successful hunter knows when not to. Large herbivores can kick, charge, gore, trample, or crush. Even an animal trying only to escape can become lethal if you stand in the wrong place. So you watch, you listen, you study direction, speed, wind, terrain, and the behavior of the herd. Hunting is partly about weapons, but it is also about information. Your weapon may be a wooden spear. That sounds primitive until you hold one. The shaft is straight enough to guide force along its length. The point is hardened and sharpened. In some cases, stone may be attached to the end. In others, the wooden tip itself may be carefully shaped and perhaps treated with fire. A spear changes your reach. Without it, getting close to a large animal is an astonishingly poor idea. With it, the idea improves slightly. Only slightly. Wooden spears exist in the archaeological record long before 100,000 years ago, showing that earlier humans already possessed sophisticated hunting technology. By your time, spears and pointed implements are part of a long tradition of adapting tools to dangerous prey. Records confirm that prehistoric humans do not rely only on one form of hunting. Different environments encourage different techniques, including close pursuit or ambush, interception near water, driving animals toward difficult terrain, and exploiting weakened or trapped individuals. This matters because a spear alone does not solve the problem. You must bring yourself close enough to use it. That is the uncomfortable part. A large animal can cover distance far faster than you can react. So terrain becomes a weapon. A narrow passage between rocks can limit movement. A muddy patch can slow heavy feet. A steep slope can tire an animal. A riverbank may channel a herd into a predictable route. Hunters who understand the landscape can reduce the need for brute strength. You move quietly through grass. Dry stems brush against your hands. Somewhere ahead, hooves shift against soil. Nobody shouts. Nobody makes a dramatic speech. Communication happens through glances, gestures to body position, and familiar signals. Too much noise could ruin hours of work. You spread apart. One person moves toward the side of the herd. Another remains lower down. Someone watches the wind. If the animals catch your scent too early, they may disappear across the horizon, taking dinner and your patience with them. Wind is invisible, but you feel it against your cheek. You notice which direction dust moves. You smell the animals before you see them clearly. Tracking depends on exactly this kind of attention. Footprints are only part of the task. Bent vegetation matters, dung matters, hair caught on thorny branches matters. The direction of disturbed birds can matter. Even flies may reveal where an animal has recently rested. Experienced trackers read tiny details that most modern people would walk over without noticing. A skilled tracker can sometimes infer speed from spacing between prints. They can distinguish an animal moving calmly from one running. They may recognize the smaller tracks of juveniles beside adults. They can tell whether several animals pass together. The landscape becomes a page covered in signs. No writing exists, yet you are reading constantly. Then there is endurance. Humans possess a useful combination of upright walking, efficient sweating, and the ability to travel long distances in hot environments. This may allow hunters to pursue animals over extended periods, particularly when prey risks overheating. The popular image of persistence hunting, where humans repeatedly track an animal until it becomes exhausted, is plausible in some ecological conditions and documented among some later hunting communities, but scholars bicker over how common such hunting is in deep prehistory. It may be important in certain places and far less practical in others. That uncertainty is useful because there is no reason to imagine every community hunting in exactly the same way. If you live in dense woodland, long-distance pursuit can be difficult. If you live in open country, visibility improves. If the weather is cool, overheating prey becomes less likely. If water is scarce, a long chase can exhaust the hunters too. Technique depends on circumstance. Sometimes the best strategy is patience. You wait near a trail, you watch a water source. Animals must drink. That predictability creates opportunity, but it also attracts other hunters. Lions know where water is, hyenas know, leopards know, crocodiles, rather enthusiastically, know. The watering place is not a peaceful prehistoric cafe where everyone takes turns. It is a concentration of thirst, nerves, and teeth. You remain alert. A hunt can fail without anyone making a mistake. The animal simply moves the wrong way. The wind shifts. A child in the distance makes noise. A bird gives an alarm call. Rain erases tracks. Prey notices movement. Failure is normal. That is important because spectacular hunting scenes survive beautifully in imagination, while unsuccessful hours leave almost nothing behind. You can spend half a day following signs and return with no meat. The energy cost is real, so hunting is always balanced against other ways of eating. When success does come, the problem changes immediately. A large carcass is valuable. It is also heavy, perishable, and attractive to predators. You cannot simply stand beside it congratulating yourself. Work begins. Stone flakes cut through hide. Joints are separated. Meat is divided into manageable pieces. Fat is treasured. Organs may be eaten quickly. Bones can be cracked to reach marrow. Every part worth carrying becomes part of a calculation. How much can you transport? How quickly can you leave? What should be eaten immediately? What might be processed later? A whole animal may contain far more weight than a small group can carry. This creates choices. High-value portions are often taken first. Fat matters because lean meat alone does not always provide enough energy. Marrow is particularly rich. A bone may therefore continue to be useful even after most flesh is removed. You place it on a stone and strike. The sound is sharp. The bone splits. Inside is a dense source of calories that no predator equipped only with teeth may have fully reached. Tools let humans exploit what others leave behind. This leads to another important strategy: scavenging. Ancient humans do not always kill the animals they eat. Sometimes another predator makes the kill. Sometimes an animal dies from injury, drought, disease, or accident. If you find the carcass soon enough, it can become food. Scavenging is often portrayed as somehow less impressive than hunting. Your stomach does not care. A carcass abandoned by lions contains calories whether or not you earn them dramatically. The difficulty is timing. Approach too early and the original predator may still be nearby. Approach too late and little remains. Hyenas can consume astonishing amounts. Vultures reveal carcasses from the air but also advertise them to everyone else. Oddly enough, watching vultures may function almost like prehistoric aerial surveillance. Circling birds can indicate that something large has died. A distant cluster in the sky is worth investigating. Of course, the birds do not provide a convenient sign explaining whether the carcass is guarded by lions. You must discover that detail personally. Scavenging can involve intimidation too. A group of humans armed with spears, stones, noise, and fire may sometimes drive other animals away from food. But this is dangerous. Hyenas are powerful. Large cats are fast. A wounded predator defending a meal is not something to treat casually. Numbers matter. One person appears vulnerable. Several coordinated adults present a different problem. This is one of the great advantages of cooperative hunting. People can surround, distract, drive, warn, carry. But cooperation demands trust. If you approach dangerous prey, you need some confidence that the people beside you understand the plan. The hunter who panics can redirect an animal toward everyone else. A person who moves too soon can ruin an ambush. A poorly placed spear can wound without stopping the animal. Coordination becomes a survival skill as real as stone knapping. And then there is the strange problem of fairness. A successful hunt may depend on only a few people, but the meat can feed many. Who gets what? The archaeological record cannot tell you every social rule governing distribution 100,000 years ago. Still, sharing likely has strong practical value. Hunters who succeed today may fail tomorrow. Children cannot obtain large prey themselves. Injured people may contribute knowledge, tool-making, childcare, or other work. Food becomes part of social bonds. One scandalous aside from many later hunting societies is that the person who makes the kill does not always receive the best portion. Rules can be based on kinship, weapon ownership, age, obligation, or group custom. Human beings have apparently been capable of making dinner socially complicated for a very long time. The important point is not any one rule, it is that meat can circulate. A carcass becomes more than calories. It becomes an event involving labour, danger, memory, status, cooperation, and perhaps storytelling. You can imagine the retelling later. Someone insists the animal was enormous. Someone else claims the spear throw was perfect. A third person quietly remembers that the animal was already limping. Some things do not require archaeology. Still, hunting remains dangerous enough that caution dominates. You avoid unnecessary contact with healthy adult animals when easier prey exists. Young, old, injured, isolated, or trapped animals may be safer targets. Season matters. Animals weakened by drought become easier to approach. Migrating herds may create temporary abundance. Breeding seasons can make certain males more aggressive and considerably less suitable for close inspection. Knowledge of animal behavior is as important as courage. You learn the difference between bravery and stupidity. The distinction can be surprisingly narrow. Eventually, meat is carried away. Your arms ache beneath the weight. The smell of blood and hide clings to your hands. Flies begin to gather. You move with purpose because every delay increases competition. The hunt is not complete when the animal falls. It is complete when usable food reaches people safely. And that is the real achievement, not the dramatic moment of attack. The planning, the tracking, the patience, the coordination, the cutting, the carrying, the avoidance of predators, the countless decisions that turn a dangerous encounter into nourishment. You walk through the late light with weight pressing into your shoulders. Around you, others carry their own portions. Nobody has conquered nature. Nobody needs to. You have simply managed to take something from a world filled with faster bodies, sharper claws, stronger jaws, and very little sympathy. And for one evening, that is enough. Thirst becomes dangerous long before hunger does. Your mouth dries first, then your pace slows. The air feels hotter. Decisions become less careful. A journey that seemed manageable at sunrise begins to stretch strangely beneath the afternoon sun. Around 100,000 years ago, water is not simply something you drink. It is geography. It is timing. It is memory. And very often, it decides whether a landscape can support human life at all. You stand on dry ground beneath a pale sky and search for signs that would be almost meaningless to someone unfamiliar with the country. A line of greener vegetation in the distance. Birds travelling repeatedly in one direction. Animal tracks converging through dust. Insects hovering low near dusk. A depression where damp soil might remain beneath the surface. Water can advertise itself without being visible. You learn to read those advertisements. The obvious sources are rivers, lakes, springs, and streams. But obvious does not mean reliable. A river may shrink during the dry season. A shallow lake may turn brackish. A pool may become muddy and crowded with animals. Rain-fed channels can disappear completely. You cannot look at a blue line on a map because no map exists. Instead, a living map occupies people's memories. Someone knows where a spring lies beyond a ridge. Someone remembers a seasonal pool between two distant hills. Someone knows that a particular river still holds water even when its surface breaks into isolated pools. This information is as valuable as food, perhaps more valuable. Records confirm that early human sites are frequently associated with access to water, whether along rivers, lake margins, springs, wetlands, or coastal environments. The relationship makes sense immediately. People drink water, prey animals drink water, edible plants cluster near water, fish and shellfish live in water, reeds, birds, insects, and useful materials often gather around wetlands. Water concentrates opportunity. It also concentrates danger. You approach a muddy bank carefully. Footprints overlap everywhere. Antelope, large hoofed animals, carnivores, birds, perhaps elephants, perhaps humans. A drinking place is one of the busiest locations in the landscape. The mud is soft beneath your feet. The air smells of wet earth and vegetation. Flies hover over shallow pools. You kneel, but not without looking first. Crocodiles do not care that you have travelled a long way. Large predators may wait nearby because thirsty animals must eventually approach. A place that keeps you alive can also become the most dangerous place you visit that day. Timing helps. You may avoid drinking at the same hour when certain animals usually arrive. You choose sections with better visibility. You approach in groups. Someone watches while others collect water. A steep bank is less appealing if escape would be difficult. A shallow open edge may be safer than a narrow channel surrounded by reeds. Even the simple act of drinking becomes a small tactical decision. Then there is the question of carrying water. This is one of those problems that seems trivial until you remove bottles, pottery, metal cups, and plastic containers from existence. Water is heavy. 1 litre weighs about 1 kilogram. Carry several litres and your shoulders notice quickly. Organic containers may offer solutions. Animal skins can hold liquid. Large shells may serve as small vessels. Wood can be hollowed. Plant materials can sometimes be folded, woven, or sealed. Certain gourds are useful containers in later human societies, though exactly when particular container traditions begin is difficult to establish. Most such objects decay. Stone tools survive. Water bags usually do not. So the absence of an ancient bottle in the ground does not mean people never transport water. It means archaeology is sometimes unhelpfully biased toward things that refuse to rot. Your route, therefore, depends partly on how far you can move between reliable sources. If water cannot be carried efficiently, travel corridors narrow. If containers improve, possibilities expand. A dry stretch that once seemed impossible may become manageable. This matters enormously during climatic instability. The world of 100,000 years ago is not climatically calm. Rainfall patterns shift over generations. Lakes expand and shrink. Grasslands spread into areas that were once more arid. Then dry conditions return. Habitats move. The environment is not a fixed stage on which humans perform. The stage itself keeps rearranging the furniture. In Africa, changing rainfall can periodically create greener corridors through regions that are usually harsh. At other times, deserts expand and separate populations. No agreement has been reached on exactly how strongly particular wet phases and dry phases control early human migrations. Because climate records and archaeological evidence do not always align neatly. Still, water clearly shapes where movement is possible. You cannot cross a vast dry region because curiosity feels adventurous. You need drinkable water at intervals your body can tolerate. Climate therefore opens and closes routes. A chain of lakes can turn difficult country into a path. A drying basin can turn a familiar route into a trap. People respond by moving. Movement is not random wandering. You follow resources, you follow animals, you follow rain, you follow coastlines, you follow river valleys because they provide direction as well as water. A river is almost a natural road. Walk along it, and you rarely need to wonder where water lies. Vegetation may be denser. Animals leave tracks. Stones suitable for tools may appear in exposed banks. Fish can supplement food. The route itself teaches you what lies ahead. Coasts offer a different kind of guidance. The sea is enormous, but it provides a boundary that cannot easily be mistaken. Follow a coastline and your direction remains clear. Fresh water is still necessary. Of course, you cannot solve thirst by drinking seawater. Your kidneys would object strongly, so coastal living depends on springs, streams, rainfall, estuaries, and inland sources. Yet shorelines can support relatively dense food resources, making them attractive places when conditions are suitable. The shoreline you see is not the shoreline people will see thousands of years later. During glacial periods, enormous amounts of water become locked in ice sheets. Sea levels fall, continental shelves emerge, coasts move outward when ice melts, seas rise again and drown old landscapes. This means many prehistoric coastal camps may now lie beneath water. Entire stretches of ancient human geography are submerged. It is a strange thought. A place where people once walked, gathered shellfish, repaired tools, and watched sunsets may now sit beneath tens of meters of ocean. One curious footnote is that modern divers and marine archaeologists sometimes search drowned landscapes for traces of ancient occupation, effectively looking for human history beneath fish. The sea has hidden part of the story. Seasonal movement can reduce risk. Instead of remaining in one place until everything is exhausted, people may shift between known locations as resources change. A wetland becomes valuable during one season. A higher area becomes useful when low ground floods. A river crossing becomes easier when water falls. A dry season spring becomes crucial when smaller pools vanish. You carry not only possessions but expectations. You know roughly what a place should offer. Sometimes those expectations fail. Rain does not arrive. A spring weakens. Animals leave early. A storm damages a route. This is when flexibility becomes critical. You cannot argue with a dried pool. You must adapt. Travel itself is physically expensive. An adult may walk many kilometers in a day while carrying tools, food, material, or a child. Terrain makes every kilometer different. Soft sand tires the legs. Loose stone twists ankles. Thick vegetation slows movement. Steep slopes cost energy. Heat raises water requirements. Cold wind raises calorie requirements. A straight line between two places may be far less sensible than a longer route following shade or water. So people choose paths with experience. You cross ridges where visibility is good. You follow valleys when they offer easier walking. You avoid unstable ground. You learn where flash floods can rush through narrow channels after distant rain. Weather demand attention even when the sky above you looks harmless. A storm far upstream can suddenly change a river. Heavy rain can trap a group on the wrong side of a crossing. Strong wind can make exposed country exhausting. Fog can erase landmarks. Seasonal cold can turn a familiar route into a serious challenge. There is no forecast. The sky itself is your warning system. Cloud shape matters. Wind direction matters. Humidity matters. Animal behavior may change before rain. People become practiced observers because poor weather planning costs more than discomfort. Even a brief storm can soak clothing or hides, extinguish fire, chill children, spoil stored food, and make tracks difficult to follow. Rain is welcome when water is scarce. It is less charming when you're standing in it for hours. Then comes the problem of water quality. Clear water is not automatically safe. Stagnant pools may carry parasites. Animal waste contaminates drinking places. Dead animals can foul small sources. People cannot see microbes, but experience can still teach practical caution. Some water consistently causes sickness. Some sources are preferred. Flowing water may be chosen over stagnant pools when available. Certain collection points may be avoided after heavy use by animals. Boiling water is possible where containers and fire allow it, though how routinely this is practiced in deep prehistory remains uncertain. People learn patterns without understanding microorganisms. You do not need a theory of bacteria to notice that one pool leaves everyone miserable. Human knowledge often begins with observation long before explanation. Children learn routes early. They follow adults toward water and gradually memorize the shape of the land, a distinctive rock, a crooked tree, a ridge shaped like an animal's back, a line of dark hills. These landmarks become coordinates. There is no compass, but orientation can still be remarkably precise. The sun gives direction. Stars provide nighttime guidance. Terrain provides memory. Repeated journeys turn geography into habit. Eventually, a route becomes so familiar that feet almost seem to know it. And this may be one of the quiet foundations of human expansion. Not a single heroic migration. Not one enormous march into the unknown. Instead, generations move through connected landscapes. A little farther toward reliable water, a little farther along a river, a little farther around a coast. People explore, return, remember, and sometimes remain. The world grows through increments. Late afternoon settles over the land. Heat loosens its grip. You reach a shallow spring emerging between stones. The water gathers clear enough to reflect the sky. Hands dip into it. Faces cool. Containers fill. For a moment, everyone becomes quieter. There is relief in something so ordinary, yet no treasure shines beneath the surface. No monument stands nearby. Just water. Cool, heavy, necessary water. You drink slowly. The journey becomes possible again. A stone rests in your palm. At first glance, it is completely ordinary, grey, heavy, cold against the skin. Then you turn it slightly and notice the edge. It is thin enough to slice, sharp enough to cut hide, strong enough to shape wood, and once you understand what you're looking at, the stone is no longer just part of the landscape. It is stored possibility. You sit on firm ground with several pieces of raw stone scattered nearby. One is the material you want to shape. Another serves as a hammer. Your fingers test the surface while your eyes search for angles. This is not random smashing. Every strike matters. You rotate the stone. You choose a point near the edge. Then you hit. A flake breaks free with a dry crack. The sound is surprisingly clean. You pick up the flake and run a thumb carefully near its edge, not across it. Near it. You have presumably learned that lesson already. Freshly fractured stone can be sharper than many modern people expect. Certain materials, including flint, chert, quartzite, obsidian, and fine-grained volcanic rocks, can break in predictable ways that produce excellent cutting edges. The best stone depends on where you live. Some groups are fortunate enough to occupy landscapes where useful material lies almost underfoot. Others travel significant distances to obtain it. That tells you something important. Stone has value before it becomes a tool. You may remember where a particular outcrop lies. You may carry useful pieces away from it. You may save high-quality material rather than wasting it on crude tasks. The landscape contains resources that are not edible and not drinkable. Yet they can still determine whether you eat tomorrow. Records confirm that people 100,000 years ago already belonged to technological traditions with very deep roots. Earlier human populations have been shaping stone for hundreds of thousands of years, and by this period, Toolmakers in Africa and Eurasia can produce flakes and points using carefully prepared methods. The tool in your hand represents knowledge accumulated across generations. Nobody wakes one morning, bangs two stones together by accident, and invents an entire technological system before lunch. Children watch, beginners imitate, skilled adults correct. A badly placed strike sends the fracture somewhere useless. A good strike removes exactly the piece you wanted. The difference can be a few degrees of angle. That requires practice. You learn how hard to hit. You learn where stone hides internal flaws. You recognize when a core is nearly exhausted. You learn to prepare a striking surface so the next flake comes away cleanly. To someone unfamiliar with the process, the final object may look simple. To someone who knows, it reveals decisions. This is one reason ancient stone tools are so informative. Their scars preserve sequences of action. Each removed flake leaves a mark. Archaeologists can study those marks and reconstruct parts of the manufacturing process. The stone remembers the hands that changed it. Your immediate concern is more practical. You need edges. A sharp flake can open animal hide. It can slice meat. It can cut tendons. It can shave wood. It can scrape plant fibers. It can trim branches. A single small cutting tool may participate in several completely different tasks before its edge becomes dull. Then you can retouch it. Small flakes are removed along the edge. The shape changes. Sharpness returns. Eventually, the tool becomes too small or awkward to continue using. Only then does it become waste. Even waste can be useful. A tiny flake may still perform delicate cutting. A broken point may be reshaped. An exhausted core can become a hammering stone. People living without industrial manufacturing cannot afford the modern habit of throwing away useful objects merely because something newer looks nicer. Everything has labour inside it. Some tools are simple flakes. Others are carefully planned. One particularly clever technique involves preparing a stone core so that a final strike removes a flake of predetermined shape. You do not simply hope the stone produces something useful. You organize its surface in advance. The result can be a thin, efficient flake requiring less additional work. That implies foresight. You must imagine an object that does not yet exist. Then you arrange several earlier actions to create it. Scholars still argue whether particular stone technologies should be treated as direct evidence for advanced planning, language, teaching, or symbolic thought, because different mental abilities can sometimes produce similar archaeological results. But nobody seriously needs to believe the process is mindless. Your hands are following a sequence. The sequence exists in your head before the last flake comes off. Stone alone, however, is only part of the technological world. You turn toward a wooden shaft. Wood is everywhere in many environments, yet almost none of it will survive for archaeologists to find. That absence creates a distorted picture. A sharpened stick can dig roots. A heavier club can break objects. A long shaft can become a spear. A branch can serve as a carrying pole. Wooden wedges can split material. Simple handles can extend reach. If prehistoric technology were judged only by what survives, people would appear to spend much of their time lovingly making stone objects and then doing very little else. In reality, stone often serves to manufacture tools made from materials that later vanish. You scrape the wooden shaft with the sharp flake. Thin curls peel away. The surface becomes smoother. You rotate it slowly. A rough branch becomes straighter. A point emerges at one end. Now another problem appears. How do you attach stone to wood? A pointed flake is useful in the hand, but attached securely to a shaft it becomes something different, a composite tool, one object made from several materials. That requires binding, plant fibre, sinew, rawhide, perhaps adhesives made from naturally sticky substances. Some prehistoric peoples developed remarkably effective glues by combining plant gums, resins, ochre, or other ingredients. Making adhesive can require heating materials to suitable temperatures and mixing them in useful proportions. It is closer to chemistry than the usual cartoon image of a caveman hitting a rock. Oddly enough, ancient adhesives can be among the clearest reminders that prehistoric technology is not necessarily obvious technology. A lump of sticky material does not look impressive beside a spear point. Yet without reliable binding, the point may fall off at precisely the moment when you would prefer it to remain attached. A curious footnote from experimental archaeology is that reproducing ancient tool-making often teaches researchers how difficult supposedly simple technologies actually are. A finished point may look easy once it is sitting in a museum case. Try producing one from raw stone without modern equipment and confidence disappears rapidly. The same is true of cordage. You take plant fibers and twist them. One bundle turns in one direction. 2 bundles wrap around each other in the opposite direction. The tension helps keep them together. Suddenly loose fibers become a cord. Cord changes everything quietly. You can bind a point to a shaft. You can tie bundles. You can suspend objects. You can repair equipment. You can build more secure shelters. You may eventually make nets, bags, or traps. A piece of string is so ordinary in modern life that it's easy to overlook how transformative it is. But making strong cord requires knowing which plants produce useful fibers, how to extract them, when to harvest them, and how to twist them without snapping. That knowledge rarely fossilizes. Bone provides another option. Fresh bone can be broken, scraped, ground, and shaped. Antler can become useful where available. Bone points, awls, and other specialized tools become more visible in later periods, though organic technology probably has deeper roots than the surviving record suggests. A narrow bone point can pierce hide. An awl can make holes. A polished piece can perform tasks poorly suited to brittle stone. Different materials have different personalities. Stone is sharp but can fracture. Wood is flexible but can burn or rot. Bone can be tough but takes time to shape. Fiber is light but may weaken when wet. Good tool makers understand those properties. You select materials according to the job. This is engineering at human scale. No formulas are written down. No diagrams hang on a wall. The rules exist inside practiced movement. There is also repair. A damaged tool does not necessarily mean starting again. A loosened binding can be tightened. A broken shaft can be replaced while preserving the stone point. A dull edge can be sharpened. A cracked wooden handle may be trimmed into another useful object. Maintenance saves labor. That matters when every new object begins with gathering material. Even toolkits can be portable. Rather than carrying every possible finished implement, you may carry a few flexible tools and the knowledge required to produce more. A suitable stone core can generate several sharp flakes as needed. This is an elegant solution to mobility. You transport potential. A compact piece of stone can become knives, scrapers, cutting flakes, or points depending on what happens during the journey. The most valuable thing you carry may not be the tool itself. It may be the skill to make another one. That skill belongs to people. Perhaps one adult is particularly good at selecting stone. Another has a better eye for straight wooden shafts. Someone else knows how to produce strong binding fiber. Special ability does not require formal professions. Differences appear naturally as hands become practiced. People notice who does certain tasks well. Young learners watch closely. A mistake provides instruction. A successful object becomes a model. Soon knowledge moves through the group without a single written word. The afternoon light catches the edge of a newly made flake. For an instant it shines. There is nothing decorative about it. The beauty lies in usefulness. A few deliberate blows have transformed a lump of stone into something that extends your body. Your fingers are soft, the edges hard, your nails are short, the tool cuts. Your arms have limited reach, a shaft extends it. Your teeth cannot easily shape wood, a scraper can. This is the deeper power of technology. You are no longer limited to what your body can do by itself. You can borrow sharpness from stone, reach from wood, strength from cord, durability from bone, stickiness from resin, and you can combine all of them into objects that never existed until someone imagined them. The stone in your palm is small. The idea inside it is enormous. Cold finds the smallest gaps. It slips beneath an animal hide, crawls along your wrists, settles around your ankles, and turns an ordinary breeze into something that demands attention. You stand in a landscape where the sun is bright but the air is sharp. Dry grass bends under a steady wind. Your fingers feel stiff. The ground holds little warmth. This is one of the easiest details to miss when imagining humans 100,000 years ago. People do not live inside one endless warm afternoon. Human populations occupy environments that can change dramatically with latitude, altitude, season, rainfall, and long climatic cycles. Even within Africa, mountain regions and dry interiors can become cold at night. Farther north, human groups face winters capable of punishing exposed skin very quickly. Your body is already part of the solution. Humans possess unusually effective sweating compared with many mammals, which helps with heat, but that advantage comes with a trade-off. You have relatively little body hair. That's useful beneath a hot sun. It becomes less charming when icy wind moves across an open plain. Skin cannot negotiate. It simply loses heat. Your body tries to compensate. Blood vessels near the surface narrow. Muscles begin to shiver. You curl inward. You place your arms against your torso. These responses conserve warmth, but they have limits. Eventually behavior must take over. You seek protection. You choose where to stand. You block the wind. You cover yourself. And perhaps most importantly, you learn that warmth is not one invention. It is a system. Records confirm that different human populations develop bodies suited in part to the climates they occupy. Neanderthals, for example, tend to have broad, compact bodies that reduce surface area relative to volume, helping conserve heat in colder environments. You notice the logic even without anatomy lessons. A compact body loses heat more slowly than a long, narrow one. People living in warmer regions often benefit from builds that release heat more efficiently. These are tendencies rather than rigid rules, but they show that climate shapes people physically over long periods. Behavior, however, can change much faster than bodies do. That is where hides become interesting. You run your hand across a piece of animal skin. One side is rough and dry, the other still carries a trace of hair. Untreated hide is not automatically comfortable clothing. It can stiffen, it can rot, it can smell impressively terrible. It can become difficult to work with. So using skin effectively requires knowledge. First, the hide must be removed. Stone-cutting edges help separate it from the carcass. Then unwanted tissue can be scraped away. The skin may be stretched. It may be dried. It may be softened by repeated working. Later societies developed many tanning methods using smoke, fats, plant substances, brains, and other materials. Though determining exactly which techniques exist 100,000 years ago is difficult, still, a hide does not need to become a beautifully tailored coat to help. Draped across shoulders, it blocks wind. Wrapped around a sleeping body, it traps warm air, spread beneath you. It reduces heat loss into cold ground. Used as a screen, it changes the comfort of an entire resting place. One piece of skin can serve several purposes during its useful life. There is a practical elegance to that. You do not own a winter wardrobe. You own material that can become whatever the weather requires. The simplest clothing may be little more than wrapping. A hide can be tied around the torso. Another can cover the shoulders. Fibre or sinew can secure it. No sleeves are necessary, no buttons, no pocket mysteriously containing an old receipt. But fitted clothing offers advantages. Loose coverings leave openings where cold air enters. They can slip during movement. They can interfere with running or climbing. A garment shaped around the body stays closer, traps warmth more effectively, and leaves the hands free. This raises a difficult archaeological question. How early do humans make true fitted clothing? Scholars remain divided over when regular tailored garments become widespread, partly because hide almost never survives across such immense spans of time. Later bone needles provide clear evidence for sewing, but clothing can exist without needles. A sharp stone point can punch holes, and awl can pierce hide. Sinew can be threaded through openings. Strips of leather can tie pieces together. Even crude stitching creates structure. So the absence of a delicate sewing needle does not mean everyone walks around hoping winter will reconsider. Your hands pull two edges of hide together. A narrow strip passes through small holes. The result is not elegant. It does not need to be. Clothing is successful when you stop shivering. Hands and feet present special problems. Your fingers must remain mobile enough to grip tools. Your feet contact cold ground constantly. Footwear is especially difficult to detect archaeologically because leather, bark, and plant fibers decay. Yet even simple foot coverings could transform movement across sharp stone, hot sand, frozen ground, or thorny vegetation. Imagine wrapping the foot in softened hide and tying it around the ankle. It is not a modern shoe. There is no moulded sole, no questionable brand logo, but a layer between skin and ground reduces cuts and heat loss. That matters more than appearance. One curious footnote comes from the human skeleton itself. Some researchers have suggested that changes in the shape and strength of toe bones in later prehistoric populations may reflect habitual footwear use, since supported feet experience different stresses. The idea remains debated, but it reveals the strange detective work required when the clothing itself has vanished. Sometimes the body becomes the artifact. Head coverings may matter too. Wind across the head and neck can make cold conditions miserable. A hide hood requires only a modest amount of shaping. Wrapping material around the head provides shade in hot environments as well. Our clothing is not purely about cold. It protects from sunlight. It reduces abrasion. It shields skin from insects. It provides a barrier against thorns. A person moving through dense brush quickly understands the value of even thin protection. Heat creates the opposite challenge. You step into open country under a high sun. Now insulation becomes dangerous if it prevents the body from releasing heat. Clothing must be adjusted. Shade becomes technology. A tree canopy may lower exposure. A rock face casts a useful shadow. Temporary screens made from branches or hides can create artificial shade where little exists naturally. Timing becomes another form of protection. You travel in cooler hours. You rest when the sun becomes punishing. You resume movement later. The environment tells you how to schedule your body. There is no virtue in walking at midday simply because you plan to. Ancient survival rewards people willing to change plans. Skin itself requires care. Cuts matter. Cracked feet matter. Sunburn matters. Insect bites can become infected. Smoke may discourage some insects. Mud can coat exposed skin. Plant oils or fats may provide barriers against dryness, irritation, or weather. Exactly which substances early humans deliberately apply to skin remains hard to establish, because lotions have the unfortunate archaeological habit of disappearing completely. Yet experimentation is inevitable. You notice what soothes. You notice what irritates. You notice that certain greasy substances help prevent skin from drying. You notice that ash affects insects. Knowledge grows from repetition. There is also the simple advantage of body heat. On cold nights, people sleep close together. A child pressed between adults loses heat more slowly. Several bodies beneath shared hides create a warmer pocket of air. Infants especially benefit because small bodies lose heat faster than large ones. Human babies arrive remarkably helpless compared with many other mammals. They cannot walk, they cannot regulate every aspect of their environment. They depend on being carried, covered, shaded, fed, and kept warm. Keeping children alive therefore requires constant thermal management. You adjust coverings, you move them away from direct sun, you shelter them from wind. You carry them against warm skin. The work is repetitive and rarely dramatic. It is also essential to the continuation of the species. Older adults face their own difficulties. Bodies with less muscle may feel cold more strongly. Injury can reduce mobility. Someone unable to move efficiently cannot warm themselves through activity as easily. Again, clothing and shared warmth compensate for physical limits. Human technology does not merely extend strength, it protects vulnerability. That may be one of its most important roles. Scent enters the story too. A hide worn for days develops a powerful smell. Smoke clings to it. Fat works into the fibres. Dust gathers. Perhaps aromatic leaves are crushed into bedding or coverings, partly because they smell pleasant, partly because some plants discourage insects. You lift a hide and catch a mixture of smoke, animal, earth, and dry vegetation. To modern senses, it may seem intense. To the people around you, it smells like ordinary life. There is no detergent aisle waiting nearby. Cleanliness means something practical, drying wet material, scraping away decay, removing parasites, keeping bedding usable, preventing skin problems. A garment that stays damp becomes uncomfortable and cold, so when sunlight appears, coverings may be spread out, wind dries them, smoke can help preserve certain materials, maintenance continues endlessly. Nothing remains useful without attention. A torn hide needs repair, a binding stretches, a fibre snaps, edges stiffen. You rub and flex material until it softens again. Clothing becomes another object filled with labour, and labour shapes value. You do not discard a hide because the colour feels unfashionable. You repair it until repair no longer makes sense. Perhaps the most striking thing is how clothing changes geography. A warm body can enter places that an uncovered body cannot use safely for long. A child wrapped against cold can travel farther. An adult protected from wind can remain outside longer. Foot coverings open rough terrain. Sun protection makes exposed landscapes more manageable. Behaviour extends the environmental range of the human body. Evolution gives you skin. Culture decides what goes over it. The wind continues across the grass. You pull the hide more tightly around your shoulders. Its edge scratches lightly against your neck. Your fingers are warmer now. Your feet rest on a layer of dry plant material instead of bare ground. Nearby, someone adjusts a covering around a child. Another person stretches damp skin where moving air can dry it. There is no dramatic invention to celebrate. Only layers. Hide over skin. Fibre around hide. Bedding over earth. Shade between body and sun. Simple barriers placed exactly where the environment tries to reach you. You remain physically vulnerable. That never changes. But vulnerability does not mean helplessness. A soft-skinned primate has learned to borrow protection from the world around it, and when the cold wind returns, you do not need thicker fur, you make your own. A child reaches for something dangerous. An adult hand moves immediately. There is no discussion, no meeting, and certainly no prehistoric risk assessment form. The child is simply pulled away before curiosity becomes an injury. That small movement contains one of humanity's greatest survival advantages: other people. You live surrounded by individuals who notice when you're tired, hungry, frightened, injured, inexperienced, or about to make a spectacularly poor decision. Strength matters, tools matter, knowledge matters. But very few humans can survive completely alone for long. Your species depends on cooperation so deeply that much of it becomes almost invisible. Someone carries an infant while another gathers food. Someone watches children while others travel farther away. Someone shares a meal with a person whose search produced nothing. Someone remembers a route that nobody else knows. Someone notices that an older relative is walking slowly and adjusts the group's pace. None of these actions needs to look heroic. They are ordinary. That is precisely why they matter. You sit among perhaps a few dozen familiar people. Not all of them are equally close to you. Some are relatives. Some may have joined through partnerships between groups. Some are children. Some are elderly. Some are especially skilled at certain tasks. Personalities differ. There is affection, irritation, rivalry, patience, jealousy, humour, loyalty, and probably at least one person who explains everything for slightly longer than necessary. Human social life is complicated because humans are complicated. Yet complication brings resilience. One person cannot know everything. A group can know much more. Perhaps you recognize medicinal plants. Another person reads tracks better. Someone else makes exceptionally reliable bindings. An older adult remembers how the landscape looked during a severe drought. A younger person has the stamina to travel farther. A skilled climber can reach honey. A patient caregiver can calm frightened children. Abilities overlap, but they do not need to be identical. The group becomes stronger because knowledge is distributed. Records confirm that some prehistoric human skeletons show individuals surviving serious injuries, disease, tooth loss, and physical impairment long enough for healing to occur. Such survival can imply assistance. A person with limited mobility may still receive food. Someone with damaged teeth may be given softer foods. A wounded individual may remain with companions rather than being abandoned immediately. You cannot reconstruct every act of care from bones, but prolonged survival under difficult conditions suggests that human communities sometimes invest effort in people who cannot temporarily contribute at full strength. That investment has practical value. An injured person may recover. An older adult may possess decades of environmental knowledge. A caregiver may become a future caregiver to someone else. Human cooperation does not require everyone to contribute the same thing at the same moment. This flexibility is powerful. You see it most clearly with children. Human childhood is unusually long. A young human requires years before becoming independently competent at gathering, navigation, tool-making, danger recognition, and social behaviour. Even after a child can walk, they remain dependent. They need protection. They need food. They need teaching. They need adults to prevent experimentation with snakes. Raising one child is expensive in energy and attention. Raising several at once becomes even more demanding. So childcare often extends beyond the biological mother. Fathers, siblings, grandparents, relatives, and other companions can help. Anthropologists sometimes use the term cooperative breeding to describe systems in which individuals other than the mother contribute significantly to raising offspring. How far this pattern extends into deep human prehistory remains debated, but the benefits are easy to see. If another adult holds a child, the mother can gather. If an older sibling supervises younger children, another adult can work. If food is shared, nursing mothers are less vulnerable to short periods of poor gathering success. Childcare becomes a group investment. You watch several children playing with sticks. At first it looks like entertainment. Then one child copies an adult's throwing motion. Another scrapes a piece of wood against stone. A third imitates digging. Play becomes training without anyone announcing a lesson. Children practice movements long before those movements become necessary for survival. They chase, hide, carry, throw, balance, pretend. Social play teaches rules too. Who shares? Who cheats? Who becomes angry? How do you repair a disagreement? A child who learns to function inside a group is learning survival just as surely as one learning to recognize edible plants. Teaching can be deliberate as well. An adult slows a task so a younger person can watch. Hands guide hands. A tool is passed over. The learner tries. The result is poor. They try again. Knowledge survives because somebody tolerates beginners. This deserves more attention than it usually receives. A skilled adult can perform a task faster alone. Teaching costs time. The teacher accepts short-term inefficiency, so the group gains long-term competence. That is an investment in people who do not yet possess the skill. There are no schools. There are teachers everywhere. Language, as whatever exact form it takes, magnifies this ability. You can demonstrate where to strike a stone. With sufficiently complex communication, you can also explain what cannot be seen. Water lies beyond that ridge. A predator was seen near those trees. A particular person knows where good stone can be found. Do not eat the red berries beside the stream. Information can travel without the event itself being present. That is extraordinary. Many animals communicate immediate danger. Humans increasingly build systems capable of transporting knowledge across time and distance. A person who has never visited a place may know something about it because someone else has. Scholars bicker over exactly when language reaches levels of complexity comparable with modern human speech. Since voices leave no fossils and anatomy provides only indirect clues, the problem is especially difficult 100,000 years ago. You can examine skulls, hearing structures, genes, tools, and social behavior. None provides a transcript. Still, complex cooperation strongly benefits from increasingly flexible communication. The better people can explain intentions, the easier it becomes to coordinate. Coordination matters whenever tasks exceed one person's abilities. Carrying a heavy object, driving animals, defending children, moving camp, helping an injured companion, watching several directions at once. Human groups act as collections of bodies with shared goals. Sometimes those goals conflict. Cooperation does not create permanent harmony. People argue. Resources cause tension. Partnerships fail. Individuals compete for attention, status, food, or desirable companions. A person may refuse to share. Someone may exaggerate a contribution. Someone else may remember that exaggeration for a surprisingly long time. Social memory becomes a form of regulation. If you repeatedly exploit others, people notice. If you reliably help, people notice that too. Reputation can matter in a world without written contracts. You cannot hide easily inside a small community. Most people know what you did yesterday, and perhaps what your mother did several years ago. This encourages cooperation, though never perfectly. There may be punishment, there may be ridicule, there may be exclusion, there may be reconciliation. Social rules help groups manage conflict because endless internal fighting is costly. A community that spends all its energy feuding has less energy for everything else. Oddly enough, gossip may be one of the more useful human technologies. It sounds frivolous. It is not. Talking about absent people allows information about behavior to circulate. Who shared, who lied, who helped, who broke an agreement. You do not need a court system if reputations travel quickly through conversation. A curious footnote from studies of human social behavior is that seemingly idle conversation often contains enormous amounts of information about relationships. Around a small camp, that information can shape trust. Trust matters, especially when people exchange resources. Suppose you find a large amount of food today. You could consume everything immediately, but sharing creates a social possibility. Next week, when your own search fails, someone else may share with you. This is not necessarily a calculated transaction with exact repayment. Human relationships can involve generalized reciprocity. You help without demanding immediate compensation because the relationship continues. That spreads risk across time. It also spreads risk across individuals. Your success and failure no longer belong only to you. One person's good fortune helps buffer another person's bad day. Kinship strengthens many of these obligations. Parents invest in children. Siblings help siblings, grandparents may help descendants, but cooperation can extend beyond close genetic relatives. Friendship matters. Partnership matters. Alliances between families matter. People may form bonds through repeated exchange, marriage, shared travel, and mutual assistance. Connections beyond the immediate residential group can become crucial during scarcity. Imagine local resources failing. Your community knows another group several days away. People there recognize you. Perhaps partners have moved between the groups. Perhaps objects have been exchanged. Perhaps visits happen periodically. That relationship can provide information, companionship, mating opportunities, access to resources, or temporary refuge. Social networks effectively enlarge the landscape. You're not limited to what your small group knows directly. You may gain access to information held by others. Material exchange can reveal such connections. Stone sometimes appears at archaeological sites far from the geological sources where it originates. The distance does not always prove direct trade. A piece may move through several groups, but long-distance movement of material shows that people and objects can connect places separated by considerable distances. Such networks become a form of insurance. Local conditions fail. Connections remain. Perhaps you travel to relatives. Perhaps information arrives about a better area. Perhaps another group knows a route through unfamiliar country. Social relationships become survival infrastructure. You cannot see them in the landscape, yet they can be as important as a river. Care for older adults adds another dimension. A person who has lived for many decades has experienced rare events. A severe drought may occur only occasionally. An unusual migration pattern may return after years. A distant water source may become important only during extreme conditions. Young adults may have no personal memory of these things. An older person might. This creates what some researchers call the grandmother effect in discussions of human evolution, though arguments split along several lines over how strongly grandmothering influences human longevity and reproductive success. Whatever the evolutionary explanation, older adults can carry valuable experience. Age becomes an information store. That does not mean every elderly person is automatically wise. Humanity has never operated quite that neatly. But accumulated experience can matter enormously. When environments fluctuate, care is not limited to useful knowledge either. People may care because they are attached. A child cries when someone is absent. Partners remain close. Relatives grieve. Companions defend one another. Emotional bonds make cooperation more stable because helping is not always a cold calculation. You help someone because their pain matters to you. Empathy becomes part of survival. So does comfort. A frightened child calms when held. An injured person copes better when others remain nearby. A grieving group gathers. These responses leave almost no physical trace. Yet they shape human life. You feel a hand briefly touch your shoulder. Someone passes food across the space between you. A child falls asleep against an adult's side. Another person laughs quietly at some private joke. Nobody here could survive every danger alone. Nobody needs to. The group carries more than tools and food. It carries weakness. It carries childhood. It carries injury. It carries memory. It carries people through the periods when they cannot carry themselves. That may be the most powerful survival strategy humans ever develop. Not sharper teeth, not heavier muscles, not thicker skin. The ability to look at another vulnerable human being and decide that keeping them alive is now partly your problem too. A red stain appears on your fingertips. It is not blood, it is ochre. The mineral crumbles softly as you rub it between thumb and forefinger, leaving a dusty red colour across your skin. Nearby, someone has collected another piece, darker and richer in tone. A flat stone bears traces of grinding. The air carries the dry smell of earth and mineral powder. Nothing about this helps you outrun a predator. It does not provide calories. It does not hold water. yet someone has spent time collecting it, transporting it, grinding it, and perhaps applying it to skin, objects, or other materials. That makes it interesting. By 100,000 years ago, human survival is beginning to involve more than immediate physical needs. People are carrying information in increasingly complicated ways. Some of that information may exist in color, some may live in objects, some may be expressed through gesture, sound, decoration, repeated custom, or shared meanings that no archaeologist can directly hear. You watch the red powder gather in the lines of your palm. What does it mean? That question is difficult even for modern scholars. Ochre has practical uses. It can be mixed into compounds. It may help with hide processing. It can serve as pigment. It may protect materials from sunlight or insects under certain conditions. But ochre can also be used decoratively or symbolically. Records confirm that red ochre and other pigments occur at a number of Middle Stone Age sites in Africa, sometimes with evidence of deliberate grinding, scraping, or repeated collection. The behaviour shows choice. People are not merely picking up whatever lies nearest. Sometimes particular colours or qualities seem to be preferred. That preference might be practical. It might be visual. It might be both. Humans are very good at making one object perform several jobs at once. A red substance can be useful and meaningful simultaneously. The distinctions between practical and symbolic behaviour may therefore be less tidy than a museum label would like. You can imagine pigment spread across skin. Perhaps it marks identity. Perhaps it is decoration. Perhaps it protects against sun. Perhaps it is used during some gathering whose meaning belongs entirely to the people present. Perhaps none of those guesses is correct. No agreement has been reached on whether every early use of pigment should be interpreted as symbolic behaviour. Some researchers see repeated pigment use as strong evidence for increasingly complex social communication. Others warn that practical explanations can account for at least some examples. The powder itself refuses to answer. That silence is part of the fascination. Another object rests nearby. It is small enough to fit between two fingers. Perhaps it is a shell collected far from the water. Perhaps it has been pierced naturally. Perhaps a person modifies it. If suspended on fibre, it can be worn. Now the object moves with a body. Anyone looking at the wearer can see it. This creates a new possibility. Appearance becomes information. A decoration might show belonging. It might mark age, status, partnership, achievement, personal taste, or perhaps someone simply thinks the shell looks nice. Never underestimate that possibility. Humans do not require an elaborate ceremonial theory before deciding that shiny things are appealing. Still, personal ornaments matter because visible objects can communicate without speech. Imagine meeting people you do not know well. You cannot inspect their memories. You cannot instantly know their relationships. But clothing, pigment, scars, beads, hairstyles, and carried objects can provide clues. Modern humans do this constantly. A ring can communicate partnership. A uniform communicates role. A religious symbol communicates affiliation. A sports shirt communicates loyalty and, occasionally, poor judgment. Visual identity makes social life more efficient. Something similar may be developing deep in human prehistory. Small ornaments begin to matter far beyond their physical weight. A shell that takes hours to collect and modify is not valuable because it cuts better than stone. Its value comes from what people agree it means. Agreement is the key. Symbols only work when several minds share the same connection. A red mark cannot signify membership unless others recognize it. A particular object cannot indicate status unless people understand the rule. Meaning therefore creates invisible connections between individuals. You do not merely see an object, you understand something behind it. That ability can strengthen communities. It may also help strangers interact. Suppose two groups meet near a water source or seasonal gathering place. The encounter carries uncertainty. Are these people friendly? Related, dangerous, known? Through previous contact, shared styles of ornament or familiar materials may provide information before anyone approaches closely. Objects become social signals. This is particularly useful as networks grow. Your world may extend beyond the people you see every day. There are individuals you encounter only occasionally. There may be seasonal gatherings. Partners may move between groups. Materials may travel through several communities. Stories can describe distant places. A person you have never met may still be connected to you through someone else. Social survival begins operating across larger distances. Stone helps reveal this. Some archaeological materials are found many kilometers from their geological sources. The stone itself cannot explain how it traveled. Perhaps one person carried it directly. Perhaps several groups passed it from hand to hand. Perhaps people moved seasonally across a large territory. Whatever the mechanism, distant material proves that human movement can connect separated places. Pigments and shells can travel too. A marine shell discovered far inland immediately raises questions. Did someone walk to the coast? Was it exchanged? Was it carried for sentimental reasons? The object becomes evidence of a relationship between landscapes. You begin to understand that survival can depend on connections that are not visible from camp. If you know people elsewhere, information can move. A distant group may know that rain has fallen in another valley. Someone may describe a route around difficult terrain. A visitor may bring unfamiliar stone. A partner from another community may carry knowledge of different plants or animals. Ideas themselves travel. This is one of the great advantages of cultural learning. You do not need to invent every solution personally. Someone else can invent it. You only need a way to learn it. Consider a new method for shaping a tool. One person discovers a useful sequence. Others watch. They imitate. The technique spreads. If learners teach their children, the innovation outlives its inventor. Culture allows useful behavior to accumulate. That is extremely important. Genetic evolution is slow. Cultural change can move within a lifetime. A new technique can spread through a network without anyone waiting for thousands of generations. Your species begins adapting through shared information as well as bodies. This can happen in small ways. A better knot, a more reliable adhesive mixture, a new way to process a plant, a different method of preparing pigment, a more efficient route, a signal used during group movement. Each improvement may seem modest. Together they create resilience. But information must survive memory. Without writing, every important detail depends on human minds. This makes repetition valuable. Stories can help. Rhythm can help. Song may help. Gesture can help. Repeated customs can preserve instructions. A narrative about a dangerous place can contain geographic knowledge. A tale about an animal may teach behavior. A repeated sequence of actions can encode proper technique. You cannot prove the exact stories told 100,000 years ago. Words vanish instantly. Yet human memory is far better when information has structure. You probably know this from your own life. A rhyme stays when a random list disappears. A story preserves relationships between events. A memorable image survives longer than a dry instruction. Prehistoric people possess the same kind of brains capable of association, so knowledge may be wrapped in memorable forms. This does not require formal mythology as later civilizations understand it. It simply requires people to communicate things worth remembering. Sound itself can organize group activity. A call carries through vegetation. A clap draws attention. Rhythm coordinates repeated work. A change in tone communicates urgency. Human voices are remarkably flexible instruments. They can whisper without alerting distant animals. They can shout across open ground. They can soothe infants. They can warn. They can joke. They can imitate sounds. They can name people, places, objects, and perhaps things that are absent. The ability to discuss what is not physically present changes planning. You can talk about tomorrow, you can describe a distant spring, you can warn someone about a predator seen earlier, you can discuss a person who is elsewhere, you can coordinate an action before performing it. Language turns imagination into shared preparation. Arguments split along several lines over exactly when fully modern language emerges and how closely it resembles the speech systems used today. Some scholars emphasize anatomical and genetic evidence suggesting deep capacities for complex vocal communication. Others point out that linguistic behavior cannot be reconstructed directly from bones and tools. There is no prehistoric audio recording waiting to settle the argument. Still, complicated social networks become easier when communication grows more precise. You feel this during encounters with unfamiliar people. A few individuals appear across open ground. Nobody immediately rushes forward. Distance is maintained, posture matters, hands matter, voices matter. Someone recognizes someone. The tension changes. Perhaps relatives are present. Perhaps previous meetings have established trust. Objects are exchanged. Information follows. These encounters do not always need to be peaceful. Competition certainly exists. Groups may dispute resources. Territories can overlap. Jealousy and suspicion belong easily inside human behavior, but permanent hostility toward everyone outside your immediate group would be limiting. Exchange offers enormous benefits. New partners reduce the problems of small isolated populations. Knowledge spreads. Rare materials circulate. Assistance becomes possible during local scarcity. Connections act as bridges. Isolation, by contrast, carries risk. A tiny population can lose skills simply because the few people who possess them die. An innovation may vanish before it spreads. Genetic diversity can shrink. A group cut off from others has fewer options during crisis. Networks make populations more robust. One scandalous aside is that some objects may have travelled farther than their usefulness could possibly justify. A pretty shell carried deep inland is not winning any award for practical efficiency. That is precisely why such objects are so intriguing. People sometimes spend energy on things because those things carry social value. The behaviour feels very human. You might carry a useless gift because someone important gave it to you. You might preserve an object because it marks an event. You might wear something because it identifies you with others. Material becomes memory. This possibility leads toward another difficult question. Do people 100,000 years ago possess rituals, perhaps? Repeated pigment use, unusual objects, treatment of the dead, and patterned behavior can invite ritual interpretations. But caution is necessary. A strange archaeological deposit is not automatically evidence of ceremony. Sometimes an oddly placed object is simply an oddly placed object. Historians and archaeologists still argue whether several early behaviors reflect ritual, symbolism, practical activity, or combinations of all three. The uncertainty should remain. Deep history is full of missing context. What you can say with greater confidence is that human life is becoming richly social. Objects can matter beyond immediate utility. Materials move across landscapes. Knowledge passes between people. Skills accumulate. Appearance may communicate. Memory links generations. Identity may link individuals who are not physically together. The mind itself becomes part of the survival equipment. You lift the piece of ochre again. The powder stains your thumb. Someone nearby wears a small shell. Another person handles stone brought from far away. Voices rise and fall in calm conversation. Around you sits a network of meanings that leaves only fragments behind. The remarkable thing is not that humans survive using their minds. It is that many minds begin functioning together. A warning can become shared knowledge. A discovery can become tradition. An object can become a sign. A memory can outlive the person who first formed it. And once information can travel between minds, human beings no longer face the world only with what one individual learns during one lifetime. They carry the experiences of others. The world changes faster than memory would like. Rain fails where people expect it. Grass retreats. A lake that once stretches toward the horizon contracts into muddy shallows. Animals abandon familiar routes. Then, somewhere else, rainfall increases and land that seemed useless becomes green again. You live in a world that never promises stability. That may be the final secret of survival 100,000 years ago. Humans do not endure because they discover a perfect environment. They endure because perfection is unnecessary. They learn to survive change. You stand near the edge of a shrinking lake and watch birds gather around the remaining water. The exposed shore smells of wet mud and drying plants. Cracked ground spreads where fish once moved. Nobody needs a scientific explanation to understand what this means. Resources are disappearing. Soon a decision must be made. Stay and hope, or move. Migration sounds grand when described from a great distance. On the ground, it begins with feet. People gather what they can carry. Children are lifted. Useful materials are bundled. The route ahead is discussed. Then familiar ground slowly disappears behind you. There is no certainty that the destination will be better. That uncertainty matters. Human expansion across the ancient world is not one triumphant march. It consists of movements, pauses, retreats, failures, and new attempts. Some populations travel into unfamiliar regions and flourish. Others disappear. Some routes open during favorable climatic periods and close again when deserts or cold conditions return. Records confirm that modern humans have already moved beyond Africa by around 100,000 years ago, with evidence of early populations in parts of the eastern Mediterranean and southwest Asia. These movements do not immediately result in permanent human occupation everywhere. Some early expansions appear to end. The people themselves leave few descendants that can be traced clearly into much later populations. Survival at the species level can therefore include local failure. That sounds almost contradictory. It is not. A group can disappear while humanity continues elsewhere. A population may shrink while another expands. The survival of your species does not require every community to succeed. It requires enough communities to persist. This is an important correction to the comforting idea that human history is a straight line of progress. It is closer to a collection of experiments conducted across enormous landscapes. Some work, some do not. Climate repeatedly reshuffles the possibilities. During wetter phases, corridors through northern Africa and Arabia can become easier to cross. Grasslands expand, lakes appear. Animals move into regions that are otherwise dry. Humans can follow. Then conditions shift. Rainfall weakens. Desert returns. Populations become separated. The road effectively vanishes. Your feet may stand where travellers walked a few generations earlier, yet the journey is no longer possible. Geography changes without mountains moving at all. Water alone can redraw the human world. Cold creates another barrier. Farther north, glacial conditions repeatedly transform Europe and Western Asia. Ice sheets expand in some regions. Vegetation shifts. Animal communities change. Winter becomes longer or harsher. Yet other human populations already know these environments intimately. Neanderthals occupy large parts of Europe and Western Eurasia. They are not crude obstacles waiting for modern humans to arrive. They are humans adapted to their own worlds, skilled in hunting, tool-making, fire use, and survival under difficult conditions. If your group encounters another kind of human, the moment may be surprisingly ordinary. You hear unfamiliar voices. You see faces that are recognizably human, but not quite like those of your own companions. Bodies may be broader. Features differ. Tools may be made differently. Gestures are watched carefully, yet what happens next cannot be reduced to one answer. There may be avoidance, competition, curiosity, exchange, conflict, partnership. Eventually, genetic evidence shows that modern humans and Neanderthals interbreed. That fact means at least some encounters become extremely personal. Many people alive today outside sub-Saharan Africa carry a small percentage of Neanderthal ancestry. Other ancient human groups contribute genetic ancestry to some modern populations as well. The old idea of completely separate human species replacing one another without contact has become much harder to maintain. Human history looks tangled. That seems appropriate. Humans rarely keep social boundaries neat for archaeologists. Scholars still argue whether competition, climate, demographic differences, disease, technological change, social networks, or combinations of these factors best explain why some ancient human populations eventually disappear while others expand. There is probably no single cause. Different regions may have different stories. A population can be vulnerable for reasons unrelated to intelligence. Small numbers alone are dangerous. Imagine a community containing only a few dozen people. Several adults die during a severe winter. A disease spreads. 2 children do not survive infancy. A skilled toolmaker is lost. A few families leave. Suddenly the group has fewer hunters, fewer caregivers, fewer potential partners, and less stored knowledge. Nothing dramatic needs to happen. Demography can become a quiet emergency. Small populations are fragile. Bad luck matters more. A sequence of ordinary misfortunes can become extraordinary when there are too few people to absorb them. This is why connections between communities are so valuable. People can join other groups. Partners can move between populations. Knowledge can spread beyond one camp. If one community disappears, its techniques may survive elsewhere. Culture becomes larger than any individual group. That gives humanity redundancy. Modern engineers use redundancy because important systems should not depend on one component. Prehistoric humans reached something similar without designing it deliberately. Knowledge exists in many heads. Populations occupy different environments. Food strategies vary. Routes vary. Tools vary. If drought harms one region, another may remain productive. If one resource fails, another may replace it. Humanity survives partly because humanity is scattered. There is no single basket containing every egg. And speaking of baskets, oddly enough, some of the most important survival equipment probably disappears so completely that you will never know it existed. A woven carrier, fiber net, wooden container, or hide bag can transform how efficiently people move food and possessions. Then it rots. Thousands of stone flakes remain, politely creating the impression that everyone spends eternity manufacturing sharp rocks. The archaeological record has a sense of humour. What survives best is not always what matters most. The same problem affects human disasters. A failed migration leaves little evidence. A camp abandoned because children become sick may look much like one abandoned for ordinary seasonal reasons. A violent storm leaves no diary entry. A group that turns around at an impassable desert edge leaves no monument reading. We tried. Failure is difficult to excavate, yet it must be everywhere. People become lost. Hunts go badly. Water sources vanish. Illness spreads. Pregnancies fail. Infants die. Injuries become serious. Storms destroy temporary camps. Wildfires alter landscapes. Predators take opportunities. Other human groups may compete for desirable territory. Survival is never guaranteed, and still, enough people continue. You begin to see that the word survival can be misleading. It sounds passive, as though humans simply avoid dying. In reality, survival is active and creative. You improvise when familiar resources disappear. You adopt useful techniques. You move when staying becomes dangerous. You stay when movement becomes foolish. You form relationships. You raise children for years before they can fully support themselves. You preserve information that might matter decades later. You experiment. Most experiments probably fail. A new plant food tastes terrible. A tool design snaps. A route leads nowhere useful. Someone tries attaching something in a clever way and discovers that cleverness has limits. But failure teaches, if information is shared, one person's mistake can save another person from repeating it. That is cultural adaptation at its simplest. The advantage grows across generations. A child does not begin life knowing nothing about the environment. The child inherits a world already interpreted by other people. This plant is useful. That animal is dangerous. Water lies there. Stone can be found here. Cold weather comes at this time. Do not enter that narrow ravine during heavy rain. The accumulated instructions may never be written, but they are inherited nonetheless. This gives humans a peculiar evolutionary advantage. Genes transmit bodies. Culture transmits solutions. The two interact. A population can adjust behavior far faster than genetic evolution alone would allow. If the climate changes within a generation, bodies cannot instantly evolve. Behavior can. People can alter routes, change foods, modify coverings, shift camp locations, adopt unfamiliar materials, join different groups. That flexibility is why humans can eventually occupy environments ranging from deserts to Arctic coastlines. Not because the naked human body belongs everywhere. It clearly does not, because human behavior can build a portable environment around that body. You carry knowledge instead of claws. You carry relationships instead of armor. You carry tools instead of specialized anatomy. Specialization can be powerful, but it can also become a trap. An animal perfectly adapted to one food suffers when that food vanishes. Humans are imperfect at many things. That imperfection becomes useful. You can eat different foods, live in different social arrangements, use different technologies, travel through different landscapes, adapt to different prey. There is something almost amusing about it. Humanity survives partly by refusing to become too good at only one thing. Late light spreads across unfamiliar country. Your group has reached another place. It is not paradise. There are insects. The water tastes slightly strange. The ground is uncomfortable. Someone is already inspecting nearby vegetation with suspicion. But there is water. There is food. There are people around you. That combination is enough to begin again. Perhaps that is how humanity makes it through those immense stretches of time. Not through dominance, not through constant victory, certainly not through comfort, through persistence, through flexibility, through movement, through relationships, through the willingness to learn from landscapes that never stop changing. You look across the evening horizon. Humanity seems very small here. A few figures beside an enormous world. Yet within those figures sits something unusually durable. Memory passes from person to person. Children absorb what adults know. Strangers become partners. Old solutions are adjusted. New ones appear. Disaster arrives. And somewhere, someone finds another way. That is enough. Generation follows generation. Feet cross new ground. Voices carry knowledge farther than any single life can travel. And the fragile human animal continues. The evening grows softer now, and the enormous prehistoric landscape begins to lose its sharp edges. The distant hills darken first, then the grass becomes one quiet surface beneath the fading sky. Voices settle into murmurs. Movement slows. There is nothing left to solve tonight. No route needs choosing. No difficult ground needs crossing. You can allow the ancient world to drift farther away, carrying its footsteps, smoke, stone, rain, and quiet human persistence with it. For 100,000 years, people continue because each day only asks them to reach the next, and now your own day asks much less. The room around you is still. Your breathing can become slower. The imagined wind fades. The last glow sinks beneath the horizon. There is warmth, darkness, and the gentle certainty that no journey is required from you. Rest where you are, let the landscape disappear, let every distant footstep grow quiet, and sleep.